The ant punishment, a slow, agonizing torment for debtors in the Middle Ages. Imagine being swarmed alive, every second pure agony. Could you survive it? Before we reveal how ants became instruments of torture, step inside history's most brutal punishments for those who owed and couldn't pay. You're walking through the market after a night of heavy rain. When it happens, two guards grab you without warning. One slams a hand on your shoulder, the other twists your arm until you can't move. You turn and see it, the crimson seal of the city guard, the mark of debt and law. In the Middle Ages, this means only one thing. You've failed to repay what you owe, and now your punishment will be public and merciless. Before we go any further, here at Dark History Class, we bring you the stories they erased from the pages of history. If you're still watching, you're one of us. Subscribe now, so you never miss the truths they tried to bury. Your name is shouted across the marketplace. Heads turn. Debtor, someone mutters. The word spreads fast. Merchants who once sold to you now spit in the dirt. A woman pulls her child away as if your debt is a disease. The guards drag you forward, not toward an office or a court, but toward the pillory waiting in the square. Two rough planks of wood stand ready, holes cut for your neck and wrists. You've heard the stories, days without food, jeers that never stop, and sometimes worse, stones thrown hard enough to break bone. The wooden beam slams shut, locking you in place. The world tilts, faces blur as the crowd presses in. A rotten apple bursts against your cheek. Mud follows. The smell of sweat, ale and rot closes in around you. The laughter isn't distant, it's in your ears, under your skin. You shut your eyes, but the voices get louder. Someone yanks your hair, forcing your head up for all to see. For wealthy debtors, this humiliation could end a career. For the poor, it was only the beginning. In 14th century Florence, debtors weren't just locked in stocks. They were marched through the streets with boards hanging from their necks. The amount owed painted in big letters. Neighbors threw garbage. Some creditors shaved the debtor's head, a mark of disgrace that lasted for months. In Lübeck, Germany, repeat offenders could be forced to kneel in the mud for hours while children pelted them with filth. Sometimes the debtor's own family was made to watch, burning shame into every generation. And humiliation was only the first blow. Beatings came next. In one case from 1462, a merchant in Lübeck was stripped to the waist and whipped through the streets. 50 lashes from the market square to the city gate. Each lash ripped skin. The wounds festered for weeks. Survive the flogging, and you still face the pillory again the next market day. Debtor punishments were made to break the spirit as much as the body. An ear might be cut off so everyone could see your shame without asking. In Paris, some debtors were branded on the palm with a hot iron so that every handshake marked them as untrustworthy. A scar could be hidden, a missing ear or a burned hand could not. In some Italian city-states, public beatings were followed by forced labor, sweeping streets, cleaning public latrines, or hauling heavy loads in front of jeering crowds. These weren't just punishments, they were public performances meant to destroy dignity. This isn't the version of history they taught in school. This is the raw, unfiltered truth of how life really worked. And that's what we do here at Dark History Class. If you want more of the stories they tried to hide, hit that subscribe button now. And then, when the crowd had had its fun, came the part no one talked about. The prison. You wouldn't be taken to a clean cell. You'd be led down stone steps slick with mold, into a room where the air stank of waste and rot. Inside, men sat in chains, their clothes stiff with filth, their eyes hollow from years in the dark. In England's Fleet Prison, you paid for your own food. If you couldn't, you starved. Guards didn't care if you lived or died. In France, some debtor cells were so small you couldn't lie down. You'd stand for days, your legs swelling until the skin split. Disease was everywhere. Dysentery, lice, and fever killed prisoners faster than hunger. Rats chewed on the toes of men too weak to move. In some prisons, the smell alone made newcomers vomit before they were even locked in. But here's the worst part. Prison wasn't the end. It was the waiting room for something worse. You never knew when your creditor might decide that humiliation and hunger weren't enough, and that it was time to make an example of you for the whole town. One debtor in late 15th century Bruges was dragged from his cell after 6 months, half-starved and barely able to stand. They tied him to a post in the marketplace and nailed a sign above his head, "Owes and will not pay." Then came the lashes, each one delivered slowly so the crowd could see his face twist in pain. Some never returned to their cells. They died where they stood, their bodies left as a warning that outlasted their debt. And as you stand in the darkness of your own cell, listening to the coughs and groans around you, you hear boots clattering on stone. Someone's coming, your creditor, the guards, or the man with the whip. You don't know, but you do know this. Whatever comes next will make you wish it had ended in the square. The boots stop outside your cell, a key scrapes in the lock, the hinges groan. A guard steps inside, torchlight flickering across his dented armor. His shadow stretches over you like a noose. You're yanked up by the wrists, the rope biting into your skin. The corridor is colder than your cell. The air stinks of mold, sweat, and the faint metallic smell of dried blood. Torches hiss along the damp stone walls. You expect another day in the pillory. Instead, they lead you into a small chamber. A wooden chair is bolted to the floor. Beside it, a table lined with tools, iron pincers, ropes, a rack of pulleys. The man waiting for you isn't a judge. He's your creditor. His fine cloak hangs over the chair, his eyes cold. In some cities, torture wasn't just for traitors, it was legal for debt. In Milan, creditors could ask for what they called an examination under pain. It sounded formal. In reality, it meant the rack, the thumbscrew, the strappado. The rack stretched your limbs until tendons snapped. The strappado hoisted you into the air by your bound wrists, then dropped you suddenly, tearing your shoulders from their sockets. The thumbscrew crushed bones slowly, the pain so sharp it broke men's voices into screams. In 15th century Cologne, a tailor who owed money to a wealthy guild master was flogged daily in prison for a month. Each morning, guards stripped him, lashed him until his back was raw, then hung his torn shirt outside the prison gate as proof. By the end, he couldn't stand, yet his debt remained. In Lubeck, a merchant was chained to a frame in the marketplace. Guards heated iron rods until they glowed and held them inches from his skin, not to burn but to terrify. Witnesses said he fainted before they touched him. The debt still stood, and he was thrown back in his cell. If this shocks you, remember, this is what we do here at Dark History class. We open the doors to the parts of history they tried to keep shut. If you want more of these truths, hit subscribe now before you forget. Some punishments didn't kill right away, they let death take its time. In Bruges, a merchant accused of fraudulent borrowing was locked in an outdoor cage for 3 days. Crows pecked at his sores, the summer sun baked him by day, the cold bit him at night. When he collapsed, guards poured water over him to wake him. In 14th century France, debt tied to cheating the crown could mean death. One Parisian trader, unable to deliver supplies he'd been paid for, was hanged in the market. Merchants watched as the rope snapped tight, the unspoken warning clear: fail the wrong person, and you die. Most debtors died in the dark. Hunger turned them into skeletons. Water seeped into the cells, soaking the straw until it rotted under them. Fevers burned through bodies in days. Rats fed on the helpless. Even death didn't clear the debt. Creditors could take a dead debtors home, stripping wives of dowries and children of inheritance. Some guild records marked children as sons of oath breakers, cutting them off from apprenticeships and decent work forever. One Paris record tells of a boy of 14, son of a silversmith, who died in debt. When he applied for apprenticeship, the master told him, "The mark of your father is yours now." His future ended in that moment. The cruelty was deliberate. Debt wasn't just a number, it was a shackle the law could tighten forever. It poisoned the family name for generations. In Bologna, some debtors were marched through the streets in white shrouds as a priest read prayers for the dead. It was a living funeral, the final erasure of status and respect. In Siena, public whippings were followed by work in the city sewers, a punishment so degrading that men emerged covered in filth, the stench clinging to their skin for weeks. Now imagine this: you've endured the lash, the stocks, the cold floor, you've heard the screams from the rack, and now the guards are opening your cell again. This time they tell you the market square is waiting. They're building a stage, not for a hanging, well, at least not yet. The sound of hammers echoes down the hall. You see buckets of pitch and coils of rope. The stage isn't for entertainment, it's for a demonstration. You just don't yet know if you'll leave it alive. The morning sun spills over the square. The stage is ready. Thick beams, a raised platform, a crowd forming at the edges. You're dragged from the goal, wrists bound, eyes burning from lack of sleep. The crowd shifts as you appear. Some jeer, others watch in silence, waiting to see how far your creditor will go. For a moment, you almost hope for the pillory. At least that ends with sunset. Instead, you're tied to the center post. A sign hangs from your neck: owes and will not pay. The guard reads the debt aloud, every coin, every penalty, until the shame feels heavier than the rope. In Bruges, records tell of debtors being tarred and feathered here. In London, some were forced to kneel on sharp stones for hours as the crowd spat on them. The whip cracks, The first lash tears your shirt, the second bites skin, the third makes your knees buckle. The crowd counts aloud, not out of cruelty, but because this is what they came to see. In Florence, 1379, a merchant who defaulted on a state loan was beheaded in the piazza. In Paris, debt linked to treason brought the gallows, the body left hanging for days. You are spared, if spared means return to the gaol in chains. The debt is still there. The punishment will happen again until the coin is paid, or your body gives out. In the cell, the air is thicker now. Prisoners avoid your eyes. They've seen the stage before. They know what's next if the creditor thinks you weren't shamed enough. Some whisper of the iron collar, a ring locked around the neck until the skin beneath rots. Others speak of the walking shame, being paraded from town to town until you collapse. And always, there's the silence after the crowd leaves. The moment you realize the humiliation wasn't just public, it's permanent. You are no longer a person, you are the debt. Even if you're freed, the shadow follows. Debtors were banned from guilds, barred from public office, denied the right to speak in court. Friends turned away, families pretended not to know you. You became a ghost among the living. A Lubeck chronicle tells of a man freed after 6 years. When he returned home, his children refused to open the door, afraid they'd be marked as debtors too. He wandered the docks for weeks before vanishing from the records. The Middle Ages were not kind to the unlucky, but to the indebted, they were merciless. Debt was more than numbers. It was a sentence without an end date, a stain that could outlive you for generations. Would you have survived the stage, the pillory, the lash, the years in the dark, listening for boots outside your cell? Or would your name, like so many others, be buried in the unmarked earth outside the walls? If stories like this make you feel the past in your bones, then you've found your place. Dark History Class is where the forgotten live again. Subscribe, you belong here.